Nobody tells you that building wealth has a difficulty curve. When you're starting out, every dollar saved feels like it costs twice as much effort as it's worth. You're grinding, you're cutting back, you're making conscious decisions constantly, and the number in the account barely moves. It feels like you're pushing something uphill with no sign of the top. And then something changes. Not dramatically, not overnight. But at some point, the same habits that used to feel like a struggle start producing results that feel almost disproportionate to the effort. Money starts to move differently. Progress that used to take a year starts happening in months. Most people assume this is just what happens when you finally earn more. But that's not actually what's driving it. What's driving it is something more specific. 3 particular thresholds that, once crossed, fundamentally change how wealth building works for you. And understanding what those thresholds are and why they matter so much is the difference between grinding indefinitely and reaching the point where the process starts working for you instead of the other way around. The reason most people don't know about these milestones is because personal finance tends to be taught as a flat, linear process. Save consistently, invest regularly, be patient. All of that is true. But it leaves out something important. The experience of building wealth isn't linear. It's uneven, and the early stages are specifically disproportionately hard compared to what comes later. This matters because a lot of people quit during the hardest part, not knowing they were actually close to the point where everything shifts. They interpret the difficulty as evidence that it isn't working, when really the difficulty is just the nature of the early stages before the milestones kick in. Once you know what the milestones are and roughly where they sit, you stop wondering if you're doing something wrong during the hard part. You just keep going because you know what's on the other side. The first milestone is the fully funded emergency fund. This one doesn't feel like a wealth-building milestone because it doesn't grow. It just sits there. But what it actually does to the rest of your financial behavior is significant. Before this exists, every unexpected expense is a derailment, a car repair, a medical bill, an appliance that stops working. Any of these pulls money from wherever it can be found, often from savings, often from an investment account, often from next month's budget, which then creates a deficit that cascades forward. With a funded emergency buffer, typically 3 to 6 months of essential expenses, those same events become inconveniences instead of crises. You cover the cost, you replenish the buffer over the next couple of months, and everything else keeps moving. The wealth building process stops getting interrupted, and continuity, it turns out, is one of the most underrated factors in long-term financial progress. Every time you're forced to start over, you lose not just the money, but the compounding that money would have produced. The second milestone is hitting your first $10,000 in invested assets. The number isn't magical. What's significant is what it represents behaviorally and mathematically. Behaviorally, reaching $10,000 through consistent investing means you've already proven to yourself that you can do this. The habit is real. The system works. That confidence quietly changes how you relate to the process. It stops feeling theoretical and starts feeling like something you're actually doing. Mathematically, $10,000 is the point where compound growth begins to produce returns that are meaningfully visible. A 7% annual return on $1,000 is $70, barely noticeable. A 7% return on $10,000 is $700, still modest, but something you can actually see moving. And as that base grows, the returns grow with it. The process isn't working harder. The math is just starting to show up in a way that registers. The third milestone is reaching a savings rate above 20%. This one is less about a specific dollar amount and more about a structural shift in how your financial life is set up. Below 20%, most of the wealth building work has to come from market returns and time. You're relying heavily on external factors. Above 20%, your own contributions start doing significant work alongside the growth. The gap between what you earn and what you spend is wide enough that progress becomes visible within months, not years. Getting there usually requires two things happening together: income growing modestly and lifestyle not growing with it. It doesn't require extreme frugality or sacrifice. It just requires resisting the pull to immediately absorb every raise into a higher monthly spend. When income goes up and expenses stay roughly flat, the savings rate climbs naturally. And once it crosses that threshold, the entire pace of wealth building changes. Here's what shifts when all three of these are in place simultaneously. You have a buffer that absorbs shocks, you have an invested base that's growing on its own, and you have a savings rate that's adding meaningfully to that base every month. For the first time, the three elements are working together instead of against each other. Before these milestones, progress feels like you're carrying the whole thing. After them, the process starts carrying some of its own weight. That's not a metaphor. That's genuinely what compound growth plus consistency plus financial stability produces when they're all operating at the same time. The effort doesn't disappear, but the return on that effort changes completely. If you're not sure where you currently stand relative to these three milestones, that's actually the most useful place to start. Just knowing which one you're working toward removes the vague, unfocused pressure of trying to improve everything at once. If the emergency fund isn't fully funded yet, that's the only priority right now. Not investing, not optimizing, not anything else. A buffer that stops derailments is worth more in the early stages than almost any return you'd get from investing the same money. If the buffer exists, but the invested balance is still small, the focus is on consistency over size. Automate what you can, even if the amount feels insufficient. The habit and the base matter more than the contribution amount at this stage, and if both of those are in place but the savings rate is still below 20%, look honestly at what happens to raises and income increases when they arrive. That's usually where the answer lives, one milestone at a time. Each one makes the next one easier to reach. The hardest part of building wealth isn't the strategy, it's the early stages, before the milestones are in place, when the effort is high and the visible progress is low. That gap between effort and result is where most people decide it isn't working. But it is working. It's just working in a part of the curve where the results haven't caught up to the effort yet. Cross the milestones, not perfectly, not all at once, just one at a time in order, without stopping. The ground levels out, and when it does, you'll feel the difference in a way that no description quite captures until you're actually standing there. Keep going until you are.